I haven't even made it 50 pages into the book and I'm already crying like this. There's so much that can go wrong. Matthew Fairchild deserves the world. Why is she toying with our feelings like this? How many tears needs to fall before I can get to the happiness in this room? Please. This is too much. It's too much for me. Read books, they say. It'll be fun, they say. What's this? It's become that time of the year where my most anticipated book has been released. I need as much comfort as I can possibly get. And what better place to get comfort than from the place where I relax the most, aka my bed. It's time to start Chain of Thorns by Cassandra Clare. Now, if you're not familiar with the Shadowhunter series at all, Chain of Thorns is the final book in the Lost Hours trilogy. I have been reading the Shadowhunter books since, I want to say 2014. Although the books have caused me a great deal of pain, they've served me well so far in my life. A couple of things to note before we start this video is, if you have not read the Lost Hours series, the trilogy so far, if you have not read Chain of Gold, Chain of Iron, or Chain of Thorns, I will be spoiling all three books as I'm reading Chain of Thorns. Also, because in the Lost Hours we will be seeing characters from the Infernal Devices trilogy, you can assume that I will be spoiling events from the Infernal Devices as well. So, fair warning, if you have not read the Infernal Devices or the Lost Hours and you do not want to be spoiled for any of those books, this is the one and only spoiler warning I will give you. So, if you don't want to be spoiled, click off now, come back later once you've read all those books. Other than that, if you're only here for a good jolly time and you want to see me suffer, then please stick around and see how many tears I shed over this final book in the Lost Hours series for however many minutes this video will be. I'm not prepared for this trilogy to end. The Infernal Devices has been my favourite Shadowhunter trilogy for a really long time. That trilogy has a really special place in my heart. I probably finished that trilogy in 2015 or 2016, and now 6 or 7 years later, I still have not recovered from the epilogue of Clockwork Princess. If you know, you know. And so I'm scared for what this book will do to me, but at the same time, I can't delay it any longer because pain is inevitable. Cassandra Clare simply loves to make us suffer, and when she's literally titled one of the chapters Intermission Grief, I can only expect the worst from this book. But please come along on this great journey with me into a book of grief and suffering and pain, and hopefully one chapter of joy, if one can dream, I guess. I'm on page 15 and I'm already in distress, which does not bode well for my emotional well-being. Basically, Cordelia and Matthew are together in Paris because Cordelia wanted to run away when she overheard/saw James and Grace talking, and she came to the conclusion that James still loves Grace, although that's obviously not the case. Cordelia has had some dresses tailored for her in Paris at this like fancy place. As Cordelia is trying on this beautiful red velvet dress, the dressmaker kind of gives a slight remark to Cordelia that while she's got like a cute little gold pendant around her neck, that because she's wearing this beautiful red velvet dress, she should wear like a ruby or like a big gold necklace to kind of match the outfit. But then it says, Cordelia knew she should take it off, but she was not ready yet. Somehow it seemed a gesture more final than the slashing through of her marriage ring. This is the pendant that James gave Cordelia a couple weeks after their wedding as a gift, and it's like a gold pendant that looks like a globe. And when he gave it to her, he said, we've spoken so much about travel, I wanted to give you the world. The fact that she's still wearing it, even after everything that happened, I'm hoping for a happy ending. Will it happen? Possibly for some characters. Some other characters might be killed off. Literally not even 10 pages later since I last updated you. Jane is currently with Will and Magnus on their way to find Lucy because Lucy's doing some necromancer things in Cornwall. Who knows how that's gonna end. But they're in the carriage and James was dreaming and then he woke up and then Will says, "You were calling for Cordelia. I have never heard anyone sound as if they were in such pain. Jamie, you must talk to us." James and Cordelia being apart is literally going to break me in half. Like, I'm not okay with this. There's nothing I hate more than miscommunication, and I understand that this miscommunication thing has happened because of a so-called person by the name of Grace and a certain bracelet. But the fact that we're in book 3 and they still haven't freaking had their happy ending. Literally, I'm still in chapter 1. What am I even doing? I can't be crying this early on in the book. I shall continue on. Also, if anyone wondering, I'm literally wearing my Daisy necklace that I got from Reader Society. I'll link it down below if anyone wants to check it out. This is for Daisy. It's for Cordelia. I'm rooting for you. I actually need to stop being so emotional. I haven't even made it 50 pages into the book and I'm already crying like this. Although I will say these are like happy tears. Kind of. So Lucy just woke up after her necromancy thing at the end of Chain of Iron, where she made Jesse come alive, I guess. And she just saw him standing outside of the house that they're staying at in Cornwall, like alive. Just this whole bit has like crushed me. She had never seen him like this, never seen the wind lift his black hair or seen the flush of exertion on his cheeks, never seen his breath puff out in white clouds as he exhaled, never seen him breathe at all. He had always been in the world, but not part of it, untouched by heat or cold or atmosphere. And here he was breathing and living, his shadow stretching out behind him across the rocky ground. And then Lucy runs to him and they hug, and then for the first time she felt his heart beating against hers. Cassandra Clare does not want us well. She's like puncturing my heart at the moment. And I'm not ready, because if I'm tearing up from reading about Lucy and Jesse when they're happy, I cannot think about how I'm going to feel if they end up not happy together. And out of all the couples that are in this series, there's so much that can go wrong. Like, okay, updates. I'm almost at page 50, I haven't cried again, which should be a surprise to everyone. But Grace, who we hate on this channel, is currently in the Silent City, being questioned by the Silent Brothers about her powers and kind of her involvement in everything that Tatiana did and everything like that. I have a feeling that Cassandra Clare is going to try to make a redemption arc of Grace's story in this book, which I do understand, but at the same time I have so much hate for Grace in my heart from Chain of Gold and Chain of Iron that I'm not sure if even the best redemption arc Cassandra Clare could ever write would make up for it, to be honest, at this point. Grace is kind of waiting for her punishment while she's in the Silent City being questioned. At least Jem, my darling Jem, is wanting to use Grace to figure out what Tatiana and Belial's plans are for the future and kind of to save everyone else. And Jem even asks, like, are you not afraid? And then she says, not for myself, I have already lost everything I had to lose. But for others, yes, I'm very afraid indeed. Am I afraid? Yes, I am very afraid indeed as well. The fact that I waited 2 years only to cry more says a lot about me, I think. Grace never wanted her powers to begin with, so I understand that. The only person Grace has ever loved is Jessie. And I totally agree that Grace did not have a great upbringing. She was kind of left with Tatiana, who is not a great mother, and was forced to do things that she didn't want to do. But at the same time, some of these things that she did, she didn't actually have to do. I'm not a fan of Grace. I don't think I ever will be. I'm only on page 56. I'm literally 6% into this book, and I'm crying at every mention of Will. Will Herondale is my favourite person from the Infernal Devices, and therefore, at every mention of his name, I start crying. Knowing what I know from the Clockwork Princess epilogue, this book just makes me tear up even more every single time I think of Will as a father. Will is such a good dad, and he's so loving towards James and Lucy, and it makes me so sad to like think that this will be the final book where we see him. I read Clockwork Princess in 2015. Every single time I see Will Herondale's name in any manner, I start tearing up. Cassandra Clare wanted us to be in pain when she wrote Will Herondale's death scene in Clockwork Princess. And I will never forgive her for that, because that epilogue has brought me pain on so many different occasions that I've lost the count. And so when I read this and you get Will being a loving father to James in every scene, and it just makes me want to cry. I know that Will dies of old age as a Shadowhunter. When you read a book, you know that eventually the characters die. But if you don't read a certain character's death in a book, in your head, at least for me, I just assume that they live on happily ever after. And I don't think that they ever die, because it's not written on the page. Had it not been for Cassandra Clare's Clockwork Princess epilogue, Will Herondale could have lived on forever as a happy man in my head. But no, Cassandra Clare said no. Will Herondale living happily ever after? in your head? Think otherwise. Cordelia is in so much agony over the fact that she thinks that James loves Grace and not her. Cordelia just had a nightmare, and Matthew comes into her room because he hears her screaming. And he says, "You and I are the same. We are sick in our souls from old wounds. I know you blame yourself for Lilith, for James, and you must not, Daisy. We will recover together from our soul sickness. Here in Paris, we will conquer the pain." Also, Matthew saying that he will conquer the pain actually makes my heart, like, bleed. This is not what I want. This is not what I signed up for. James and his dad and Magnus have made it to Cornwall, and they've had a chat about Jesse and Luton, like, what to do. But James is now trying to leave. He's thinking about Cordelia and how much he misses her. He's literally saying this: he had not even begun to imagine the pain he could feel. He understood now why poets damned their hearts, their capacity for desolation and want. Nothing in the false enchantment of love he had felt for Grace had come near this. His mind had told him that his heart was broken, but he had not felt it, not felt all the jagged pieces of shattered hope, like shards of glass inside his chest. He thought of Dante. There's no greater sorrow than to recall in misery the time when we were happy. If I don't get happy Cordelia and James at the end of this book, I'm gonna have to have a word with Cassandra Clare. The fact that Will, throughout the whole of Infernal Devices, was basically in pain because he thought he couldn't be with the woman he loved, aka Tessa, and we're now getting James full on in his emotions after, like, he finally got the bracelet off, and, like, thinking about everything that he missed out on and things he didn't notice because he couldn't really feel on, like, a deeper level when he had the bracelet on. How are the people he loved the most in the world the ones he seemed to know the least? This should be a joke, but I'm not laughing. If there was one thing I didn't want in the last hours, was another freaking love triangle where there's a parvati and another girl and they both love the same person. No, Matthew and Cordelia just kiss in Paris. I feel so bad for Matthew because he's wanted to kiss Cordelia on so many occasions, and literally says, after Cordelia asks why Matthew hasn't tried to kiss her since they came to Paris, Matthew says, "Do you think I have not wanted to kiss you? I have wanted to kiss you every moment of every day. I have held myself back. I always will, unless you tell me I need no longer do so." And then Cordelia says, "I would like you to kiss me, please." And Matthew says, "Daisy," and I kiss her. No. Because I don't think Cordelia loves Matthew in that way. I think she understands that Matthew loves her in that way, but she still loves James deep down, and I think she's only kissing Matthew to forget about James. because she thinks that James loves Grace and not her. And I just know at the end of the day that Matthew is the one who's going to end up heartbroken. And also, if they're going to come back to London and Cordelia is going to be happy with Matthew in that sense, then James will step back because he's that kind of person. And I know that James will let them be happy if that's what they desire, and not tell Cordelia his true feelings for her if he knows that they can be happy together, because, and I quote what Lucy said, "I know if she does, you will go away quietly and leave them to their happiness. Believe me, I am well acquainted with the self-sacrificing nature of Herondale men." Will Herondale? Anyone? I hate love triangles so much. The only love triangle I will ever stand is Grey Heronsdales, because that is the ultimate love triangle and everyone loves everyone, and that's okay. But in this one, I can't. And it breaks my heart because Matthew Fairchild deserves the world. And if there's someone I'm gonna cry over, it's Matthew Fairchild, because that boy has been through enough and he does not need some fake love shit in Paris, in the city of love, from Cordelia, who's in love with someone else. I'm only on page 133 out of 845. I'm 15% into this book and it's already breaking me. How will I survive this? I might, but it's definitely one character or more that won't survive this book. I have a really bad feeling that Cassandra Clare has killed off Matthew. The thing is, in the Infernal Devices, we already got the death of a Parvati. Like, we felt that bond between Jem and Will break. Although obviously Jem didn't die because he became a silent brother. But we've already experienced that pain. And I personally think we should be without that pain in this series as well. Personally, if I had to throw someone under the bus, it would be Grace. Because we all know I don't like her anyway. And I can say that perfectly fine because these are fictional characters and not real life people. I would throw Grace under the bus if we can save Matthew Fairchild. And I think a lot of people would agree with me. No. What am I reading? Cordelia and Matthew were just kissing, and they're like kissing as they went up to their hotel room or place that they were staying at in Paris, and the concierge tried to like tell them something, so I just knew automatically that James would be in that freaking room, and they came in, kissed, and then suddenly the light turns on and there's James. This is what I feared, because now James is not going to want to tell Cordelia how he feels. I freaking hate Cassandra Clare. Why is she toying with our feelings like this? So Matthew just stormed out of the hotel room because he was like, James, you know how I feel about Cordelia, and then you come here and you want her back? What the fuck? No. But even Matthew doesn't know about the Grace bracelet. He just thinks that James had Cordelia but like didn't do anything with it. And now James just had the perfect opportunity to tell Cordelia about the bracelet, and he didn't. Cordelia's like, how can I believe you, like, we were together and you never told me that you loved me, and from what I can see, like, you obviously loved Grace. And then she says, tell me something that would make me feel this is real. And then James says, James had come to Paris determined to tell Cordelia the truth about Grace, about the bracelet, to tell her she had his whole heart and soul and always had. He realized now that this would be binding her with chains. She was kind, his Daisy, the sort to weep over an injured kitten in the street. She would pity him and his chained love, pity him for what Grace and Belial had done to him. She would feel obligated to stay by his side, return to their marriage because of that pity and that kindness. Pity and kindness were not love, only free choice was love. If he had learned nothing else from the horror of the bracelet, he had learned that. And it says, I love you. The time I have been married to you, Daisy, has been the happiest of my life. But then it says, if you love Matthew, then tell me now. I will stop importuning you. I will leave you two to be happy. I'm not okay with this, because James is saying all of this, not sure that Cordelia loves him in the same way that he loves her. This is breaking my heart. How had he lived with her in the same house for weeks and not kissed her, touched her every day? He would die for that chance again. I will not have this, because there's no way for all three of them to be happy at the same time. And everyone needs to know the truth, and Matthew is hurting too much, and Matthew has gone through too much pain. If Matthew dies in this book and does not experience happiness for one moment in this book, I will, once I get my copy, I will throw it out the window and I will burn that book and it will never see the light of day again. I'm literally only on page 155. I have a question. Why do every single character in Chris and Claire's books, especially the Herondales, think that it's just better to be in pain than tell the truth to the people that they love because they think they will spare their feelings? Case in point, James. Matthew says, because what it looks like is that the moment Cordelia left you, you decided you couldn't bear being left. I suppose no one ever has, have they? Everyone's always loved you. And then James, thinking he has to explain things to Matthew, obviously, but he feels like he has to tell Cordelia first about the bracelet, and therefore he's not going to tell Matthew about the bracelet. And he says, better to be hated than pitied, by Daisy, by Matthew, though the thought of being hated by his parvati made him sick. Why am I crying like this? No one's even dead yet. James and Matthew and Cordelia, all back in London at the Institute. Cordelia's about to leave to go home, and James confronts her. She tells James and Matthew before she leaves, I feel I've hurt you both, been unfair to you. These are things that must be settled with my own conscience. And then she leaves, and Matthew says, I didn't know. I had no inkling when I went to Paris with Cordelia that you would mind. I did not think you loved her. I would never have gone if I had thought that. And then Matthew says, I knew that once you lived together, once you spent all your time with her, you would come to love her too. And besides, when you find you're in love with your best friend's wife, you don't tell anyone. You drown yourself in drink, alone in London or in Paris, until either it kills you or the feeling goes away. He says, the butler requires me. But James says, I require you more. Matt, let me help you. And Matthew says, I couldn't bear it right now to be held by you. Whatever else happens, don't hate me, James. Please, I don't think I could bear it. And James says, I could never hate you, Matt. And the things, I could never hate you, for all my hate is reserved for myself. I have none left over for anyone else. What the actual fuck is there? I literally have 650 pages left. How many tears needs to fall before I can get some happiness in this room, please? How do people read books and not cry and get emotionally attached to the characters? Because I can't do that. This is too much. It's too much for me. As of the other couples, I know I speak about Matthew, Cordelia and James every single time I talk to you, because those are the people I'm the most emotionally invested in. Hair nails have my heart, and that's not on me. That's on Cassandra Clare, to be honest. So take your problems up with her. Whilst Cordelia was away, Alistair and Thomas were together. I need them to end up together, because Alistair, although I know what he did to Matthew when he was a child at the academy, I will see past that, because one, he's a great brother to Cordelia, and obviously with what Matthew did, that was not what Alistair wanted. And also from the previous books, knowing that like he made his choice, being like, I could either be bullied or be the bully, and he sadly decided to be the bully. But under the circumstances, understandable. That being said, I do believe in an Alistair redemption arc. I think his character growth is quite good from like how we knew him at the academy, and like everything that he has had to burden as like the eldest son. No, I will not cry. But he and Thomas deserves to be happy. As does everyone. Anna and Ariadne need to be together as well. I refuse anything else. But I fear that there are too many couples that need to be together to be happy, and we all know Cassandra Clare, so that's not gonna happen, is it? Thomas just told Matthew that he's in love with Alistair, and it makes my heart so happy but also so sad. In my dream world, all these people are happy. I have gotten as far as to page 344, so I'm now 40% into the book. It's currently 11:30 on Friday, and I'm emotionally distraught. Little update: Cordelia doesn't think that James loves her. Lucy and Jessie are kind of happy, but whenever they kiss, Lucy's kind of drawn into this like weird dark space, and so Jessie's a bit scared of that. Grace told Jessie everything that she did to James. Jessie told James that he now knows everything that happened and what Grace did. James doesn't want to tell anyone about the bracelet because he fears that they're going to pity him and that they're going to look at him differently for not being strong enough to kind of go against the dark magic and like the control that Grace had over him because of the bracelet. But then he was speaking to Jessie about it, and Jessie was saying like Belial kind of taking over his body and killing people whilst being in him and like controlling Jessie. Like, do you look at me differently? Do you pity me because of that? And then James is like, no, like you were not in control of that, you were being controlled. And then Jess is like, exactly. In light of Cordelia still not thinking that James loves her, Anna told Cordelia, like, James is special, he has always burned bright, but when he looks at you, his light blazes up like a bonfire. How can someone tell you that and you still don't think that James loves you? Now, Cordelia was worried about Matthew, so went to find him because Matthew is an alcoholic. Dealt with that whole situation. Matthew is now at his own flat, and the whole Merry Thieves is helping him, and it's really sad because Matthew is like, I don't want to be a burden, like, leave me be. He wouldn't even let Oscar, his golden retriever dog, stay with him. And then James went into this whole thing where He loves you. Animals are innocent. To have their trust is an honor. He will be miserable unless you let him stay with you, help you. You're not saving him from a burden by keeping him away, only breaking his heart. And obviously he was talking about James and everyone else. So they had a little reunion, which low-key broke my heart. And then Alistair's moving to Tehran. His mum is like, Cordelia can stay because she has a husband, family, friends, whatever, in London, but she's moving. Alistair's then moving to help his mum with the baby that's gonna arrive soon. And Thomas was like, no, why are you leaving? Like, you can't leave. And Alistair's like, there's no one here for me. You're the only one. Alistair literally says, you can't be my only reason to stay. I can't expect you to carry that weight. It isn't fair to you. And he also says, all I have is you. And then Thomas says, am I not enough? After Alistair has been and seen Thomas, he's at home. Cordelia goes to find him. And Alistair says to Cordelia, the disease he being Matthew, that our father had is a disease of shame, as well as of addiction and need. Shame poisons you. It makes you unable to accept help, for you do not believe that you deserve it. And then Cordelia says, I think that is true about many things. Turning away love because one believes one does not deserve it, for instance. And then Alistair's all like, Thomas could love whoever he wants. Like, he could be with anyone he wants. Why would he pick me out of everyone? And then Cordelia says, I'm not sure we choose who we love. I rather think love is something like a book written just for us. A sort of holy text is given to us to interpret. There's just way too many people and too many emotions running around. It's just not great for my my heart. It's almost midnight. I'm gonna call it a night for tonight. I will most likely not finish the book tomorrow because I've got plans in the evening. I think Sunday might be a day of mourning. I need to stop being so dramatic. Anyway, good night for now. So, it's now Saturday, and I have read a lot more since the last time I updated you. It's definitely been an emotional roller coaster so far. To update you, Cordelia tried to summon some demons. Well, she did summon some demons to try to figure out what Belial was doing. James came to her rescue and was like, Cordelia, do you understand what would happen to me if you were hurt? He literally says, do you know what it means to me that you cannot protect yourself? Do you understand that I am terrified every moment of every day and night for your safety? Christopher is visiting Grace a lot more in the City of Bones, and the yearly Christmas party that the Herondales put on at the Institute is on, but because Grace can't go because she's always in prison, Christopher came with champagne and was like, because you can't come, I figured I would bring a bit of the Christmas party to you. Christopher Lightwood needs to be protected at all costs because he is the sweetest soul. Grace is growing on me. If we rewind the day to when I said that I would happily throw her under the bus, I would throw Grace under the bus if we can save Matthew Fairchild. And I think a lot of people would agree with me. I may have been a bit harsh. Sue me for it. I don't care. But Grace is definitely growing on me. Because when Christopher came to visit her, she was like, actually, I'm gonna have to tell him the whole truth. Because she has been truthful to Christopher. She never used her powers on him whatsoever. How nice. But she never told him about the bracelet, obviously. So she told Christopher that he needs to help her reveal the truth to Cordelia. which eventually happens. But before then, we're at the Christmas party. Everyone's kind of low-key having fun. Cordelia and James talk. So, remember the necklace, the pendant of the globe? Well, turns out that James actually put a scrap of paper in the pendant. And it's like some quote from a poem or something. It goes like this: "There yet are two things in my destiny, a world to roam through and a home with thee. The first were nothing, had I still the last. It were the haven of my happiness." And then he's basically saying, it means I would rather have a home with you than all the world. Are you kidding me? And then she leaves James behind, goes to find Matthew to break poor Matthew's fragile heart. Like, I know there's no easy way to break someone's heart. It's still so heartbreaking because they had Paris and Matthew got to have that little time with her. Cordelia says to Matthew, "What I feel for James hasn't changed. It has nothing to do with you. You ought to be adored above all things, for you're wonderful. You ought to have someone's whole heart, but I do not have a whole heart to give you." And then Matthew's like, "Because you still love James," and Cordelia's like, "I've always loved him. I always will. It's like a part of me, it's part of my heart, like there's no other way, like I can't help it. I love him." And the thing that killed me was this. Matthew sounded as if he was drowning. And then he says, "Am I so hard to love?" And my heart breaks. Matthew leaves, and then you think, oh, Christmas party, let's have fun. No, because Tatiana shows up from the middle of nowhere and then takes Alex Lightwood, aka Cecily and Gabriel's son, who's only a baby, and holds a knife to his throat and is like, everyone's gonna pay. But then she reveals that Belial is Tessa's dad, and she comes up with this whole thing that they've been conspiring with Belial, and then everyone, aka at least Mr. Bridgestock, who is the Inquisitor, is like, well, that's shady. He doesn't like them anyway, because he's got some vendetta against them. And then Tatiana disappears with Alex. Everyone's running around like headless chickens. Anyway, continuing on from that, Cordelia and the younger Shadowhunters managed to find Alex, and then Tatiana is sent to the Silent Brothers to be imprisoned in the City of Bones. But everyone's like, she was captured a bit too easily. Why? One might think. Because they've now found the baby. Herondales are being questioned by the Inquisitor and everyone else, and Charles, who's got no spine. It's like, actually, it's kind of suspicious that you guys never told us that Belial is Tessa's dad. We later on finds out that Charles is actually the one that Bridgestock probably has blackmailed, so there's that. During this whole questioning, Christopher sneaks Cordelia off to visit Grace, and finally, what we've been waiting for since Chain of Gold, Cordelia knows about the bracelet. We get a happy little reunion between James and Cordelia in their house. James says, "If it were not for you, my Daisy, I would have belonged to Belial long ago, for there's no one else in this world, my most beautiful, maddening, adorable wife, that I could ever have loved half as much as I have loved you. My heart beats for you, only ever you." If there's one thing I know, it's that Cassandra Clare knows how to write a love poem or love confession, and then we just get like some pages where Cordelia and James can finally be happy, and I'm thinking to myself, we're not even on page 500. There's more than 300 pages left. Will we get a final happy ending for Cordelia and James that we've always wanted? If not, at least we'll always have these pages. Now, Charles is head of institute at the moment, whilst the adults are away, which no one is happy about. Now, Grace has shown up at the institute, bleeding all over the place. I mean, like, she took my power. Like, we have never seen Grace like this, and it is low-key making me feel for her, which I never thought I would say. I will say this: I will never forget what Grace did to James. The bracelet situation is ingrained in my mind. I will never forget that, and I will never forgive her for that. But dear Christopher Lightwood is making my heart soft towards someone I thought I would always hate. He literally says, "I suppose I have always thought everyone deserves a second chance. We are each given only one life. We cannot get another one. We must live with the mistakes we made." And then he says, "I see how hatred poisons the person who hates, not the person who is hated." I think we're in for some interesting next chapters. Tatiana is outside with a herd of demons, and she was like, "Lightwoods, Carstairs, Fairshallst, Herondales, come out and meet your fate." I don't see this ending very well. Not James saying, "I want Cordelia who can leave me, because then I know that when she stays with me, it is by choice." I know I'm crying as if like someone's died, and I know these might be just fictional characters, but Christopher is dead, and I'm not okay. That's all I have to say. Read books, they say. It'll be fun, they say. What's this? Belial came around. Tatiana's dead. Cordelia killed her under the influence of Lilith, because she's her paladin. But now Matthew and James are gone in this world. I'm assuming they'll come back, so I'm not too worried about them at the moment. But then Christopher's dead. And Thomas is the only one of the merry thieves that is currently in London at the Institute. Also, London is kind of in a lockdown because Belial has like closed off the entire city because he wants to take over London for some reason. I knew that this book would be sad. I've just gotten to chapter 27, which is the chapter right after intermission, Grief, which happened right after the chapter, which was called, the chapter was called The Remorseful Day. So maybe I should have predicted death in that chapter, and I low-key did. But not gonna lie, when I for a little while ago said that, you know what, maybe I wouldn't throw Grace under the bus because of Christopher, right this moment I wouldn't mind if Grace was the one who was dead instead of Christopher. But you know, we move on. Better things ahead. Let's hope. Basically, what I'm predicting will happen is that Cordelia is going to start using Cortana again and be like, I may be the freaking paladin or whatever of the stupid Lilith, but if she manages to kill Belial, she only needs to strike him 3 times with Cortana for him to die, and she's struck him twice, so 1 more to go and then he's out of here. But every single time that she uses a weapon, she's using it on behalf of Lilith. But the world, the place, wherever that Belial is in right now, Edom or something, is apparently Lilith's like home. So my hope is that Cordelia kills Belial and therefore gives Lilith back her home, and then Lilith can be like, you give me back my home, you can be free now. I think I need a break because I'm like exhausted from crying. I'm starting to get a headache from crying so many tears. It's currently Sunday. It's 20 to 7 in the evening. I've been like out all day, which is why I haven't been able to read, but I did finally get my edition of Chain of Thorns. This is the Watchdogs exclusive. I just haven't had the time to take a look at it because I literally just came home like 5 minutes ago and I'm like ready to finish this book. Some predictions before I dive into like the final bit. Cordelia, Lucy, James and Matthew are all in Edom. The rest are in London, other than obviously the Shadowhunters are in Idris, which are like most of them. The only way for Belial to be in London is for him to possess someone. He believes that James will be strong enough because James is connected to Belial in one way because of he's his grandson. Now, I think what's going to happen is that the only way that they're all going to get out of Edom is for James to sacrifice himself, let Belial possess him, then they will all be transported back to London, and the only way for James to survive and for them to kill Belial is for Cordelia to use Cortana to kill James but not kill him. When Cordelia killed Tatiana with the ice sword that Lilith gave her, Lilith said to her, it's a shame you didn't use Cortana because you could have saved her. I'm thinking James will sacrifice himself because he thinks that someone can save him, whether that's Cordelia or Matthew, and Cordelia knows that she can use Cortana the 3rd time to kill Belial and at the same time heal James. Anyway, less than 100 pages left of this. I'm scared, but I also feel like I've already cried so much over Christopher, so can she kill off another character? Okay, well, James is now letting Belial possess him, which is part of his grand plan, but this is what I predicted, so I'm okay with this because I know it's gonna end well. It's fine. Cordelia's gonna save the day anyway, so it's okay. Hope at last. Grace and Jesse obviously managed to fix well, mostly Grace, managed to sort out the fire messages, so they got a message to the Shadowhunters in Idris that they could get a portal to the Silent City in a way, and then they've managed to find a way back there anyway. And Ari's mum, Flora, was there and held out her hand. And it says here, she reached out her hand, not commandingly, but hopefully, as if to say, "Come here, please," and Arya went to join her. So Matthew's by himself, which means that Belial has probably possessed James and gone back to London, which means that Matthew, Cordelia and Lucy are going to use the portals to go back to London. So far, my prediction is going well. I can't deal with Alistair and Thomas. They are the cutest couple. Like, Thomas asked what you said to me in the library when we were in there with Christopher. What did it mean? It sounded like poetry. And Alistair translates, "Boy, your beauty is beyond all description. How can I wait when you're so beautiful?" I know my theory, and I know it should be correct. But if this chapter 35, if I'm gonna have to see, which I will have to see, Cordelia stab James, I think I'm gonna be physically unwell. James just stabbed himself in the heart with Belial in him. Or I just said to Anna, "Just us, wherever you are, is home to me." The fact I literally predicted this happening. I'm a genius. I knew it. I knew it. Okay, so my battery actually died last night as I was finishing like the final 50 pages of Chain of Thorns. And I just couldn't stop reading it, so I figured I would just finish it and then I would get to you today with final thoughts and also overall rating of said book. Now, I have a lot of thoughts. I've had some time to think about it and I'm ready to discuss. I'm going to try to keep this bit not too long, but if it is, I apologise. But honestly, if you made it this far, I applaud you because I believe this vlog is going to be very long. I think overall the book was good, but it wasn't great. I'm so sad to be saying that because I wanted this book to be great, but it just didn't give what it was meant to give. Literally all the problems in this book could have been resolved if the characters just spoke to each other, but the characters in Cassandra Clare's books, especially this one, are just too selfless and they think they don't deserve the love that people want to give them, and therefore they think the happiness that they should have, someone else should have instead. So honestly, at one point I got a bit mad because I was like, this is going too far. Like, I just want Cordelia to be happy, and although we finally got that, the way we got it was no. Now, Chain of Thorns was definitely a very character-centered book. There wasn't much to the plot, to be honest, which is why I'm surprised that the book was as long as it was. Now, I was reading on my Kindle for the most part, and in my Kindle version the book's like 850 pages, but the physical edition is 670 pages or so. I feel like the start was just the love triangle between Matthew, Cordelia and James, which to me was a bit stupid in the first place. And then after that whole thing got resolved, we got Kit's death, which I'll speak about a bit later. And then after that we got some I love yous from different characters, and oh, I can't live without you, maybe I actually do deserve happiness, the world's gonna end, so let's just be together. and then they were being attacked, and then, oh, we better save London, and then they saved London and everything was fine. Also, on top of that, I feel like a lot of the scenes in the book were unnecessary, and then the scenes that were necessary weren't there. When we get to the point of the story where most of the things are resolved, Cordelia and Lucy are going to Edom to save James and Matthew. Lilith couldn't send them the whole way to where Matthew and James were, which makes sense. So they had to track through the whole of Edom to like find them. That whole sequence that was like split up into multiple parts of them walking through was very pointless to me. I understand that their whole journey through Edom to get to Matthew and James in the end was kind of them resolving their relationship and understanding why they've kind of kept secrets from each other and that sort of thing, but it just didn't make sense to me. Also, I felt like Lucy and Cordelia's relationship wasn't that well written. Like, they're meant to be best friends, they're meant to be parbatai, like that's their end goal. But I didn't feel that connection between them. Like in my head, I didn't understand why they were meant to be parbatai. When we've already read about like great parbatai couples before, like I just didn't feel that for them. And so then for me, their whole journey through Edom made no sense. Also, it was just really boring because nothing happened. I think when you've built up so much for a finale in like a trilogy like this, it should have been a larger scale problem, if that makes sense. Everything that happened post Kit's death was so predictable. I'd already guessed that what was going to happen, so when we got to those points, I wasn't emotional over it whatsoever. I predicted how James was going to save London and how Cordelia was going to save London. Like, the only thing I got wrong was that James was the one who drove the sword into his heart instead of Cordelia being the one to do it. I do get, like, the authors might want to guess at what's going to happen, but it was just way too predictable. Don't get me wrong, I'm so happy for the happy ending. Like, the epilogue gave me so much joy to read, but at the same time, when you're reading a book like this, although you always hope for a happy ending, you do expect some troubles along the way. Like, you were meant to get this grand finale, like this massive battle at the end, but you never got it. Like, you're meant to feel as if the characters have all the cards stacked against them, but you never got to that point, because when you were meant to get to that point, you'd already guessed what was going to happen and how they could solve it. I was never scared for any character's death. And speaking of characters' deaths, Kit's death came out of nowhere. Like, Tatiana threw a knife at him and he was like, oh guys, I'm fine, because it hit him in the shoulder, and then suddenly Lucy comes back and then Anna's like, he's dead. What do you mean he's dead? How? It just like made no sense to me. I think in addition to Kit's death being so, like, I'm not gonna say boring because like there was a battle, but his death came out of the blue, which, to be fair, okay, that happens in books. I think something that Cassandra Clare also definitely missed in this book was the other characters' reaction to Kit's death. Like, it felt like I was more emotionally depressed from Kit's death than everyone else. Like, yes, you got the initial reaction, like, oh my god, Kit's dead, and you got from the other people's point of views, like Ari seeing Anna's reaction and like how Anna was coping with her brother's death, and then you could see from Cordelia's point of view, she was describing like how Thomas must have felt being possibly the only Mare Thieves left, because at this point James and Matthew had disappeared. And then other than that, it was just like a line here and there scattered throughout the book. You got like a line at the end of the book in the epilogue when Matthew was looking at the water in the park and Cordelia was saying, oh, I wonder if he is thinking about the same thing that James dreams of, where Christopher's standing at the other end of the riverbank waiting for them all to come and meet him in death. Where was Cecily and Gabriel's reaction to their son's death? Will and Tessa, like, none of the other characters that actually loved and knew Kit, we never saw their reaction to his death. And not that I wanted any other major characters to die, but I think if you're only focusing on one person's death, then you kind of have to make it believable that other people are sad about it. I was so choked up about Kit's death when it happened, but like I barely cried about him later on in the book because all the other characters had just moved on. With the ending being so predictable, I think what Cassandra Clare could have done was make some of the things that happened more emotional and like worse than what they were. Like, we never got to actually read the scene when Belial was possessing James, like when he went into his body. We got like a short description from James when he felt like he was trapped in his own body because he couldn't move. Like, if he wanted to look up with his eyes, he couldn't decide to do that himself. It was like his soul was trapped in his own body. But like, you were never scared that James's soul was gonna die or be like ripped apart from his body at any point. And so because I knew the whole thing about Cortana, I knew that he would be fine in the end. I do also think the scene at the end when James takes Cortana and like kills himself with it, Cordelia is the only one present, and so you're only getting the reaction from Cordelia, but Cordelia believes in James, so she's like, he'll be fine. Although you've predicted that he's gonna survive, there should have been a moment where you thought he was dead, but you never got that. I think if we got the scene, but with everyone storming into the church and stopping, seeing James take the sword and plunging it into his own heart, because then you would get everyone being shocked and be like, what's going on? He's dying. I would have liked to be more emotionally manipulated by Cassandra Clare at the end, and I wasn't for some reason. But other than those things, there were a lot of good things about the book as well, obviously. I absolutely loved Ari and Anna. Their whole character build up, and Ari like leaving her home, moving into Anna's place, and them finally opening up to one another and finally being together. The final scene when you get them like throwing things into Jesse's old like casket thingy. Cordelia describes that Anna makes sure that she matches her waistcoat to Ari's dresses. Loved it. I love that. Other couples, Alistair and Thomas, could potentially be like my favorite. Like, Cordelia will always in my heart be my favorite in this book, but Alistair and Thomas were just amazing. Thomas being finally happy in his own body and like freely loving Alistair, Alistair letting Thomas love him and being happy, I loved so much. You get the scene where Thomas is like, I love Alistair Carstairs, I'm gonna move in with him, and if you guys are not okay with that, I'm leaving anyway. And they're so great. I think I said this previously, Alistair's character arc is probably the best one in this whole book, I think. Honestly, there's so many good characters in this book, but Alistair Carstairs he's working for that top spot. I'm just saying. Other than that, my Jordelia heart is of course happy. We got their wedding night scene. James shooting off that doorknob to get the door open absolutely had me in tears. I think they're just adorable together, and like, how can you not love them? You can't. I think Matthew finally loving himself and accepting love from everyone else, him finally telling his family about what he did when he was younger and them accepting him was really sad. But I feel like I kind of wish that we got that whole scene and not just like in the epilogue as like a scene that was just thrown in the end, but like, oh, I forgot to mention this, here you go. To end it all, Grace. I don't know how to feel. The Mere Thieves and like the whole friendship group have accepted Grace into their friendship group as Jess's sister. They're all taking Christopher's advice and letting her be part of the group. No pointing, dwelling on the past. You've only got one life, so believe in second chances. I'm still upset about Grace because I don't know, at the beginning of this vlog I was so full on ready, like I'm never gonna let Grace live through this book. Like, I'm so angry with Grace, but I do understand at the end of the day she did what she had to do to survive. To sum up, I will say it was overall a good book, but I just felt like we're kind of robbed of some important scenes and dragged along for some unnecessary scenes. Although we got all the love scenes that we wanted between our favorite characters and our favorite couples, I do think we never really hit the climax of the book. As the final book in a trilogy, there should have been more things at stake and it shouldn't have been as predictable as it was. But nevertheless, it was a good book. It just wasn't great, as I've said. I do think I probably would give this book 4 stars, maybe 3.5. At the end of the day, it was a good book, but as I've said, it just didn't give me everything I wanted. I am a bit disappointed by it. Will I cry every single night for the next couple nights over Kit's death as I did yesterday? Yes. A friendly reminder, don't listen to Die First before going to bed and thinking about Kit. Because I did that and the waterworks started. That being said, I do hope you guys enjoyed this reading vlog of me reading Chain of Thorns. It definitely was an emotional roller coaster, to say the least. Until next time, happy reading.